The champagne was Dom Perignon. The view was 40 stories of glittering Seoul. The company was a woman in emerald silk who'd once shared her last rice ball with a stranger. Song Ji-hoon thought he'd finally won. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his crystal flute. Hana smiled, uncertain if the gardener she'd protected was truly gone or just buried beneath this man in the $15,000 suit. Ji-hoon's eyes tracked movement over her shoulder. His expression went arctic. His hand shot across the table, yanking her against the leather booth. Champagne splashed across black marble. "Ji-hoon, what? Don't move." His voice was steel. "Don't look at the door." A red dot appeared on the wall where her head had been. It danced, then settled on her chest. "Laser sight." "It's a trap," Ji-hoon whispered, his body a wall between her and death. "They're already inside." Through the frosted glass, shadows moved. Professional spacing. Military precision. Not guests. Executioners. The door handle began to turn. Song Ji-hoon no longer crawled through dirt or apologized for broken pots. The man in the VIP booth wore charcoal Tom Ford tailored to hide his shoulder holster. His watch cost more than a sedan. 3 city blocks paid him tribute. Prosecutors returned his calls within the hour. The gardener was dead. The dragon was awake. Tonight he was celebrating Hana Eze, the woman who'd shared her last meal with a man she thought was nobody. Purple neon pulsed through floor-to-ceiling windows. Bass frequencies made heartbeats synchronize. Everything screamed luxury, privacy, invincibility. Hana looked beautiful and terrified in emerald silk and diamond shackles. Ji-hoon had made a fatal error. He'd let himself care in a world where love was a loaded gun. His security chief had texted all clear 20 minutes ago. The lounge was swept. Exits secured. All lies. The waiter near the bar wasn't pouring drinks. He was watching angles. His eyes tracked the room like reconnaissance. Then Ji-hoon saw the second one. The third. Tactical spacing. They're already inside. The red laser dot appeared on Hana's chest. They'd learned his weakness. Now they'd exploit it. Before we dive in, understand this. What you're about to hear isn't just a story of a boss and a maid. It's a collision between a world of shadows and a heart that refused to go cold. A woman who spent years being invisible. A man who thought the only way to lead was through blood. And a legendary mentor who is about to learn that when you threaten a dragon's only light, the entire city burns. Now, if you've been following Hana and Ji-hoon's journey and haven't subscribed yet, I get it. No pressure. But if, by the time the glass starts shattering on that 70th floor, you find your heart racing, if you realize that some bonds are stronger than any mafia oath, then tap that subscribe button and tell me in the comments. Would you choose the empire or the one you love? Because in this world, loyalty is the only currency that matters. Let me show you how the gardener's secret nearly cost them everything. 2 weeks had passed since the night of blood and broken glass at the estate. 2 weeks since Hana discovered the man she'd fed rice balls to was the most dangerous criminal in Korea. She still wasn't used to the suits. Ji-hoon stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, backlit by Seoul's skyline, wearing power like a second skin. The charcoal jacket was cut to emphasize shoulders that had never actually been hunched. His posture was military straight. His voice, when he spoke on the phone, carried the kind of authority that made grown men stammer apologies. Gone was the shuffle, the stutter, the apologetic ducking of his head. This man didn't apologize. He commanded. "Hana." She startled, realizing she'd been staring. "Yes." The estate manager position. He set down his phone and turned to face her. "Have you made a decision?" The offer had been generous. Obscenely so. Salary, benefits, her mother's medical care covered indefinitely. All she had to do was manage a property for a man who terrified her and fascinated her in equal measure. "I don't understand why you want me," she said quietly. "I'm just a maid who..." You're the woman who stood between me and a blow when you had everything to lose." His eyes, no longer watery and confused, but sharp as surgical steel, locked onto hers. "You're the only person in my entire organization I trust. Because I didn't know who you were. Because you saw someone suffering and chose compassion." He moved closer and Hana's breath caught. "That's rare in my world. Priceless, actually." The gardener would have kept his distance, afraid to impose. The boss closed the space between them like he owned it. Because he did. He owned everything. "The man I helped in the garden," Hana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is he gone?" Ji-hoon's expression softened, just a fraction, just enough. "He was never real." "Then who are you?" He reached up, and Hana forced herself not to flinch as his fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, but his hand bore scars she'd never noticed when they were covered in dirt. "I'm the man who's going to keep you safe," Ji-hoon said. "Whether you take the job or not." It wasn't a comfort. It was a claim. And the suit fit him perfectly. The lounge was a study in controlled excess. Purple neon bleeding through tinted glass, leather booths the color of midnight, and a bar backlit with enough liquor to stock a small country. Ji-hoon had called it a celebration. A private dinner to toast Hana's new position as estate manager. But Hana had learned to read the tension in his shoulders, and tonight, beneath the tailored suit and easy smile, he was coiled tight as a spring. "Relax," he said, pouring champagne into crystal flutes that probably cost more than her childhood home. "We're safe here. This is my territory." Hana wanted to believe him. She tried to settle into the plush booth, tried to ignore the weight of the emerald dress he'd insisted she wear, tried to pretend she belonged in a world of floor-to-ceiling windows and bottles with French names she couldn't pronounce. But something felt wrong. The waiter who delivered their appetizers moved wrong. Too precise. Too aware of the room's geometry. His eyes had scanned exits and angles, not menus and drink orders. Military training left marks on how a person carried themselves. Hana's father had been a soldier before illness bent his spine. She recognized the posture. "Ji-hoon," she said quietly, her fingers tightening on the champagne flute. "The servers." "I know." His voice was calm, but his hand had moved inside his jacket. "Don't react. Keep your eyes on me." Her heart hammered. "How many?" "For that I've counted. Maybe more in the kitchen." He lifted his glass as if toasting, but his gaze tracked the room with predatory focus. "They're not here for the tips." A second waiter appeared near the hallway to the restrooms. He wasn't carrying a tray. His hand rested inside his vest, right where a shoulder holster would sit. "Your security," Hana whispered. Ji-hoon's jaw clenched. "Compromised. This whole thing is a setup." The lights dimmed just slightly. Atmospheric, the other guests would think. But Ji-hoon knew better. A red laser dot appeared on the wall behind Hana's head, dancing like a firefly before settling lower. On her chest. Right over her heart. "Get down," Ji-hoon said, his voice dropping to the register that meant violence was coming. Now. The first shot punched through the frosted glass partition exactly where Hana's head had been 3 seconds earlier. Ji-hoon had already moved, his arm a bar of steel across her shoulders, dragging her down behind the marble table as suppressed gunfire hissed through the air like angry wasps. Crystal shattered. Champagne and glass rained down in a glittering cascade. "Stay low." Ji-hoon's voice was combat sharp as he flipped the table, creating a barrier between them and the door. His pistol was already in his hand, matte black, compact, lethal. Hana pressed herself against the leather booth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't the kitchen at the estate. This wasn't mercenaries breaking in from the storm. This was calculated, professional, designed. A kill box. 2 waiters rushed the booth from opposite angles, weapons raised. Ji-hoon fired twice, controlled, precise. Both men dropped before they cleared 5 feet. The VIP booths have reinforced walls, he said, ejecting his spent magazine and slamming in a fresh one with practiced efficiency. Bulletproof glass on 3 sides. They can't flank us easily. But they can wait us out, Hana said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Smart girl. Ji-hoon's smile was all teeth and no warmth, which means we move before they bring reinforcements. More gunfire erupted from the main lounge. Screams. The other patrons, oblivious trust fund socialites who thought danger was a delayed reservation, were scattering like prey. Ji-hoon grabbed a champagne bucket, dumped the ice and hurled it toward the hallway. The metallic clang drew fire, bullets sparking off marble columns. Service in trance, Hana said suddenly. Behind the bar. Staff use it for deliveries. Ji-hoon's eyes snapped to hers. You've been here before? I worked here. 2 years ago. Before the estate. She pointed toward the bar's back wall. There's a service elevator. Goes down to the loading docks. For a fraction of a second, something like pride flickered across Ji-hoon's face. Stay behind me. Move when I move. Don't stop for anything. He stood, providing cover fire as Hana scrambled from the booth. The world became muzzle flashes and breaking glass and Ji-hoon's broad shoulders blocking her from death. The gardener had protected her with words. The boss protected her with bullets. They hit the service corridor at a dead run, Ji-hoon covering their retreat with controlled bursts that sent the mercenaries diving for cover. The door slammed behind them, and the world changed. Gone were the purple neon and leather opulence. The service corridor was concrete and fluorescent lighting, the kind of utilitarian space the wealthy never saw. Hana's heels clicked against industrial tile as she led Ji-hoon deeper into the building's hidden arteries. Left here, she said, yanking him around a corner. The main elevator will be locked down. They'll expect us to use the stairs. Ji-hoon followed without question, his pistol tracking their 6. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't think to look. Hana stopped at a janitor's closet, pulling a keycard from behind a fire extinguisher. Old habit. Staff always kept spares hidden in the same spots. The card still worked. She pushed through a narrow access door into a concrete stairwell that smelled like cleaning chemicals and neglect. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. These are the utility levels, Hana explained, descending quickly. Her knowledge of the building's skeleton was muscle memory from 12-hour shifts and stolen break-time cigarettes. Kitchen access, HVAC, electrical. The loading docks are 3 floors down. Behind them, the service door exploded open. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell, multiple sets closing fast. Ji-hoon grabbed her wrist, pulling her into a recessed doorway. His body pressed against hers, his hand covering her mouth as shadows passed above them. She could feel his heartbeat, steady, controlled, nothing like her own rabbiting pulse. The mercenaries continued down. Amateur mistake, assuming their targets would keep running. When the footsteps faded, Ji-hoon released her. How do you know this place so well? I scrubbed these floors for 2 years before the estate. Hana's voice was quiet. Rich people never see the people who clean up after them. We're invisible. Not anymore. Ji-hoon's expression was grim. They're using you to get to me. Then we make them regret it. She pushed open the door to the electrical sublevel, and the smell of ozone and copper wiring surrounded them. Hana Eze had been invisible her whole life. Tonight she'd use it as a weapon. The storage room was cramped and dark, smelling of industrial cleaner and cardboard. Hana's breathing was too loud in the confined space, her back pressed against metal shelving as Ji-hoon checked the door lock. We have maybe 3 minutes before they realize we doubled back, he said, holstering his weapon. Then his eyes dropped to her arm. You're bleeding. Hana looked down. The emerald silk was torn at the shoulder, dark wetness spreading across the fabric. She hadn't even felt it happen. Adrenaline was a hell of an anesthetic. "It's nothing," she started, but Ji-hoon was already moving. He shrugged out of his jacket, ripped a strip from his shirt with efficient brutality, and reached for her arm. His fingers were gentle despite the violence they just committed. "This will hurt," he warned. It did. Hana bit down on her lip as he cleaned the wound with vodka from a flask he kept in his jacket, because of course he did. The burn was immediate and vicious. "Grace," Ji-hoon said, his voice clinical. "Bullet caught you when we were leaving the booth. Half an inch deeper and it would have hit the artery." He wrapped the makeshift bandage with practiced precision, his hands steady. Hands that had killed 6 men in her kitchen. Hands that had shared rice balls behind a garden shed. "Where did you learn field medicine?" Hana asked, needing to focus on something other than how close he was, how the darkness made every touch feel amplified. "You don't survive my world without learning how to keep people alive." His eyes met hers. "Or knowing when to let them die." The bandage was secure. He should have pulled away. He didn't. "I'm sorry," Ji-hoon said quietly. "You were safer when I was nobody." "You were never nobody." Hana's voice was barely a whisper. "You were just pretending. And now you're paying for my honesty." She reached up with her good hand, her fingers finding his jaw. Stubble rough beneath her palm. "Real. Solid. Then make it worth the cost." The storage room was dark and cramped and smelled like chemicals. But when Ji-hoon kissed her, tasting like smoke and desperation, Hana forgot they were hiding. She forgot the men hunting them. She forgot everything except the dragon who'd finally stopped pretending. The parking garage stretched 3 sublevels beneath the building. A concrete cathedral for vehicles worth more than most homes. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white, turning luxury cars into chrome skeletons. Ji-hoon's hand remained on Hana's back as they moved between pillars, his eyes scanning for threats. His Mercedes was parked in the VIP section. Matte black bulletproof glass, engine that purred like a predator. He stopped 10 feet away. "What?" Hana whispered. "Look at the tires." His voice was flat. "They're sitting too low." She squinted. He was right. The suspension sagged almost imperceptibly, like the vehicle was carrying extra weight it shouldn't have. "Explosives," Ji-hoon said. "Probably C4 rigged to the ignition. Turn the key, we paint the ceiling." He moved to his backup vehicle. An Audi SUV 2 spaces over. Same problem. Then the Lexus. All of them sitting heavy, waiting to become coffins. "They knew every car registered to you," Hana said. "Which means this isn't random." Ji-hoon's jaw clenched. "This is someone who knows my patterns. My assets. My..." Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Multiple sets. Tactical boots on concrete. Ji-hoon grabbed Hana's hand and pulled her deeper into the garage, weaving between vehicles until they reached the motorcycle section, a separate area where Seoul speed addicts stored their toys. He stopped in front of a Ducati Panigale V4, jet black with red racing stripes. Custom exhaust. Competition-grade suspension. "Tell me you know how to ride," Hana said. Ji-hoon smiled sharp, dangerous. "I don't just know how to ride. I used to race these before I inherited the syndicate." He swung his leg over, hot wiring the ignition with practiced ease. The engine roared to life, a throaty snarl that echoed through the garage. "Get on. Hold tight. Don't let go no matter what happens." Hana hiked up her emerald dress and climbed behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist. She could feel the weapon holstered against his ribs, the tension in his core. The mercenaries burst from the stairwell, weapons raised. Ji-hoon twisted the throttle. The Ducati screamed toward the exit ramp like a bullet seeking flesh. And Seoul's neon-soaked streets opened before them like a glittering war zone. Seoul at midnight was a fever dream of neon in motion. Purple light bleeding from nightclub facades, holographic advertisements 3 stories tall, traffic flowing like arterial blood through the city's veins. Ji-hoon carved through it like a surgeon with a scalpel. The Ducati screamed between a taxi and a delivery truck with inches to spare. Hana's arms locked around his waist, her face pressed against his back, feeling every shift of his body as he leaned into turns that defied physics. Behind them, two black SUVs muscled through traffic, their grills like predator teeth in the rearview mirrors. "Hold on," Ji-hoon shouted over the engine's roar. He downshifted, the bike's rear tire breaking traction as he whipped into an alley barely wide enough for the handlebars. Dumpsters and fire escapes blurred past. Hana's injured arm screamed in protest, but she didn't loosen her grip. The alley spat them onto a main boulevard. Ji-hoon accelerated hard, weaving through lanes of startled drivers. The SUVs followed, relentless, professional, closing the gap with practiced aggression. A passenger window rolled down. Muzzle flash. Bullets sparked off asphalt inches from the Ducati's rear tire. Ji-hoon swerved, using a city bus as a shield, then cut across 3 lanes toward the Riverside Expressway. "They're not trying to kill us," Hana shouted in his ear. "They're hurting us." Ji-hoon's body tensed. She was right. Every time he tried to break east toward his safe houses, the SUVs cut him off. Every westward escape route was blocked by coincidental traffic. They were being pushed north, toward the business district, toward the skyscrapers, toward a kill zone someone had prepared in advance. "I know," Ji-hoon said grimly, "but if we stop we die. So we keep moving until I find an opening." The Ducati hit 140 kilometers per hour on the Riverside Expressway, neon reflecting off the Han River like liquid fire. Hana's dress whipped in the wind, emerald silk transformed into a war banner. She'd been invisible her whole life. Now she was flying through Seoul on a stolen motorcycle, clinging to a monster, hunted by worse monsters. And somewhere in the terror, she realized she'd never felt more alive. The business district skyscraper rose like a glass blade into Seoul's smog-hazed sky. 70 floors of corporate ambition and steel infrastructure. Ji-hoon had no choice but to drive into its underground garage. The SUVs had boxed him in, forcing him up the access ramp like cattle to slaughter. "This is wrong," Hana said as they abandoned the Ducati. "Why corner us here?" "Because someone wants a conversation before they kill me." Ji-hoon's expression was carved from stone. "And they want witnesses." The elevator only went one direction, up. They rode in silence, Ji-hoon's pistol drawn, Hana's heart hammering against her ribs. The numbers climbed 50, 60, 65, until the doors opened onto the rooftop helipad. Wind tore at them immediately. Seoul sprawled below like a circuit board of light and shadow. The helipad's glass floor reflected the city's glow, turning the surface into a mirror of neon and stars. A man stood waiting at the far edge, his back to them, hands clasped behind him. Black gloves, expensive suit, posture that radiated authority. Song Ji-hoon. His voice carried over the wind, cultured, almost paternal. "You've made quite the spectacle tonight." Ji-hoon's weapon didn't waver. "Master Kwon." Hana's blood turned cold. "Master." The title carried weight, history. The man turned. He was older, maybe 60, silver-haired, with the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and backroom deals. His gloved hands remained visible, unthreatening. "You taught me everything," Ji-hoon said, his voice brittle. "How to kill, how to lead, how to build an empire on fear. And you learned too well." Kwon's smile was almost fond. "So well that you became a threat to the very foundation I built. The 7 dragons were mine to rebuild. They were mine to give." Kwon stepped forward, his shoes clicking on glass. "And what's given can be taken away. You've grown sloppy, Ji-hoon. Emotional. Keeping pets." His eyes slid to Hana with clinical detachment. "That pretty maid has made you vulnerable." Ji-hoon's finger moved to the trigger. "She's not a pet." "No." Kwon's gloved hand moved, fast, practiced. A rifle's laser sight appeared on Hana's chest. Somewhere in the darkness a sniper waited. Then prove it, Kwon said softly. Choose. The Empire or the girl. The red dot danced across Hana's chest like a death sentence written in light. Ji-hoon's pistol tracked between Kwon and the shadows where the sniper hid. Impossible angles. No clean shot. His mentor had planned this perfectly, a choice designed to break him either way. You have 5 seconds, Kwon said, checking his watch with theatrical precision. 4. 3. The glass beneath their feet groaned. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed from the center of the helipad, spreading like frozen lightning. The reinforced glass could hold a helicopter, but 70 floors of wind stress and decades of temperature cycles had left it fragile. One good impact and it would shatter. Kwon noticed too late. Hana moved first. Her hand dove into the torn seam of her emerald dress, the hidden pocket she'd sewn into every uniform she'd ever owned. The same pocket where she used to hide tips, spare keys, the survival tools of the invisible. Her fingers closed around the compact can of industrial-strength furniture polish she'd taken from the storage room. She sprayed it directly into Kwon's face. The old man stumbled back, clawing at his eyes, his polished composure shattered. Ji-hoon fired, not at Kwon, but at the rooftop access door where muzzle flash had betrayed the sniper's position. The shooter's rifle clattered across the helipad. Kwon recovered fast, decades of combat training overriding the chemical burn. He lunged at Hana, gloved hands reaching for her throat. Ji-hoon intercepted him mid-stride. The two men collided, and the glass beneath them screamed. More cracks. Deeper. The entire pane shifting under their combined weight. You chose her, Kwon snarled, blood streaming from his nose. You chose weakness. I chose what you never understood. Ji-hoon's fist connected with his mentor's jaw. Loyalty that isn't bought. The glass gave way. Not all at once. A section near the edge where Kwon stood, where decades of hairline fractures finally surrendered to physics. The old man's eyes went wide as the floor disappeared beneath him. He fell screaming into Seoul's glittering void. Ji-hoon lunged for Hana as more glass shattered, his hand closing around her wrist just as the section beneath her feet cracked. They hung suspended, Ji-hoon gripping the helipad's metal frame with one hand, Hana dangling 70 stories above certain death. I've got you, he gasped. Don't let go. Hana's world had reduced to 3 points of contact. Ji-hoon's hand around her wrist, the wind tearing at her dress, and the 70-story drop yawning beneath her feet. Seoul's lights blurred through her tears. Somewhere far below, Master Kwon's body had already met the pavement. She couldn't hear the impact over the screaming wind. Hana, look at me. Ji-hoon's voice cut through her terror. Eyes up here. She forced her gaze upward. His face was twisted with effort, veins standing out in his neck as he held both their weight with one arm. The metal frame he gripped was bending, groaning, threatening to give. I can't pull us both up, he said, his voice strained but steady. You need to climb. Use my arm. I'll pull you down. You won't. His eyes locked onto hers with absolute certainty. I've got you. I will always have you. Now climb. More glass shattered somewhere behind them. The entire helipad was coming apart, a slow-motion collapse that would take them both if they didn't move. Hana grabbed his forearm with her free hand. Her injured shoulder screamed, but she pulled herself upward, using his body as a ladder. Her feet found purchase on his belt, then his shoulder. Ji-hoon grunted with the effort, his grip on the frame turning his knuckles white. Almost there, he gritted out. One more. Her hand found solid ground. She pulled herself onto the intact section of the helipad and immediately turned, grabbing Ji-hoon's jacket as he hauled himself up beside her. They collapsed together on safe concrete, gasping, bleeding, alive. The glass section where they'd been standing moments ago gave a final, terminal crack and fell away completely, leaving a gaping wound in the helipad's floor. Hana's entire body shook. Not from fear, from the realization that Ji-hoon had chosen her. Not the empire. Not the territory. Not the carefully constructed power he'd killed to build. Her. You could have let go, she whispered. Saved yourself. Ji-hoon pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering against her cheek. No, he said simply. I couldn't. And in that moment, suspended between sky and stone, Hana understood. The gardener had been a lie. But this, his hand in hers, his body shielding hers, his choice to fall with her rather than rise without her, this was the truth. 3 nights after the helipad, Ji-hoon woke Hana at midnight. Get dressed, he said from her doorway, backlit by the estate's security lights. Something formal. She'd learned not to question his middle-of-the-night requests. They usually involved either violence or revelation, sometimes both. 20 minutes later, she descended the main staircase in a cream silk dress she'd found laid out on her bed. The estate's grand hall had been transformed. Candles everywhere, hundreds of them, turning the marble floors into rivers of gold. White flowers she couldn't name filled crystal vases. And standing in the center, looking deeply uncomfortable, was a man in priest's robes. Ji-hoon waited at the base of the stairs, wearing a black suit that made him look like sin personified. His expression was unreadable. What is this? Hana whispered. A choice. He extended his hand. The same choice I made on that rooftop. You. Always you. The priest cleared his throat. Mr. Song has made it clear that my discretion is worth considerably more than my discomfort with the hour. Hana's heart stopped. You want to marry me? Now. Like this. I want to make it official before someone else tries to kill us. Ji-hoon's smile was crooked, almost vulnerable. In my world, marriage is a contract. A merger. But this? He gestured to the candles, the flowers, the absurd romance of it all. This is a promise. That you'll protect me? That I'll belong to you the way you belong to me. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. No more cages. No more golden prisons. You'll be my equal. My partner. The only person in this entire criminal empire who can tell me no. Hana looked at the priest, at the candles, at this man who'd killed for her and almost died for her and was now offering her everything he had. I don't even have a ring, she said, tears threatening. Ji-hoon pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. No diamonds. No ostentation. Just metal and promise. Yes, you do. The priest began the ceremony in hushed tones, his words weaving English and Korean, African tradition and criminal pragmatism into something that shouldn't work but somehow did. When Ji-hoon kissed her, tasting like smoke and forever, Hana realized she wasn't marrying the gardener or the boss. She was marrying the man who existed in the space between, the one only she had ever seen. 6 months later, the estate had transformed into something that resembled both a fortress and a home. Ji-hoon sat at the head of the conference table in what used to be the formal dining room, surrounded by his lieutenants, hard men with harder histories, all watching the woman standing beside him with wary respect. Hana wore tailored black, her hair pulled back in a style that was all business. The diamond on her left hand caught the light as she gestured to the tactical map spread across the table. The Port Authority is vulnerable here, she said, tapping a section of Seoul's waterfront. 3 shifts, minimal overlap. If we move the shipment on Thursday instead of Friday, we avoid both the Federal Patrol and the Jade Serpent's surveillance. Min-jun, Ji-hoon's second-in-command, leaned forward. With respect, Mrs. Song, the Thursday route puts us in view of the warehouse cameras, I know. Hana pulled up footage on the tablet, which is why I had them repositioned last week. The blind spot is now wide enough for 2 trucks. Silence around the table. Then Min-jun smiled, genuine, impressed. You've been busy. I had a good teacher. Hana glanced at Ji-hoon. who'd been watching her with something that looked dangerously close to pride. The meeting concluded with efficiency. The lieutenants filed out, bowing to both of them now, not out of fear, but something harder to earn: respect. When they were alone, Ji-hoon pulled Hana into his lap, his arms circling her waist. "You're terrifying them," he said against her neck. "Good. They should be terrified of someone." She turned to face him. "You've made too many enemies to surround yourself with yes-men. Is that why I married you? To keep me honest? You married me because I'm the only one who's seen you covered in dirt and blood and everything in between." She kissed him softly, and loved all of it. Outside, the estate's gardens bloomed under security floodlights. The staff moved with purpose, not fear. The walls were high, but no longer a prison. The gardener was gone. The maid was gone. What remained was a dragon and his queen, building an empire on something more dangerous than fear: trust. And in Song Ji-hoon's world, that was the rarest currency of all. Sometimes the person the world ignores is the only one with the power to save the king. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more stories where the shadows are deep, but the loyalty is deeper.